Will Russia go to war with Ukraine? All week, you've heard numerous answers to this question.
Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the largest invasion of a neighboring country in Europe since World War II.
Putin's war against Ukraine has caused thousands of deaths and economic damage globally. The war against Ukraine that Vladimir Putin started already has considerable economic consequences in Russia, where the ruble has lost half of its value and inflation is soaring. Moscow's stock exchange is closed. Many international companies like Ikea, McDonald's, Visa, and MasterCard have left the country. Russia's economy is to shrink by at least 15% this year. Weakened and isolated, Russia risks becoming very dependent on China in the future. What will become of Europe if it does not overcome these economic difficulties? Will the war cause a crisis bigger than anyone ever expected? On the 24th of February 2022, Russia attacked Ukraine in a significant heightening of the Russo-Ukrainian conflict that started in 2014. The intrusion caused Europe's most significant refugee emergency since the Second World War, with around 7.3 million Ukrainians escaping the nation and 33% of the populace dislodged. It has additionally caused worldwide food deficiencies. The intrusion started on the morning of the 24th of February when Putin declared a special military activity for the neutralization and denazification of Ukraine, building up his misleading story of partnering Ukraine with Nazism. Minutes later, missiles and airstrikes hit Ukraine, including the capital, Kiev, followed by a large ground invasion from multiple directions. The invasion has received widespread international condemnation. The United States General Assembly passed a resolution condemning the invasion and demanding a full withdrawal of Russian forces. The International Court of Justice ordered Russia to suspend military operations, and the Council of Europe expelled Russia. Many countries imposed sanctions on Russia, as well as on Belarus, which supported the invasion, which has affected the economies of Russia and the world and provided humanitarian and military aid to Ukraine. Protests occurred around the world. Those in Russia were met with the mass arrests and increased media censorship, including a ban on the words war and invasion. The International Criminal Court has opened an investigation into crimes against humanity in Ukraine since 2013, including war crimes in the 2022 invasion. What is happening to the financial market right now? The war in Ukraine is the third asymmetric shock, as economists call it, that the Union has experienced in the last 2 decades after the 2008 financial and economic crisis, and the following Eurozone crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. An asymmetric shock is a sudden change in economic conditions that affects some EU countries more than others. The war in Ukraine is indeed having a much greater impact on neighboring countries due to the influx of refugees and their heavy dependence on Russian gas. The Russia-Ukraine conflict has triggered turmoil in the financial markets and drastically increased uncertainty about the recovery of the global economy. Russia is the world's third oil producer, the second natural gas producer, and among the top 5 producers of steel, nickel, and aluminum. It is also the largest wheat exporter in the world, accounting for almost 20% of global trade. On its side, Ukraine is the 6th largest producer of corn, 7th of wheat, and 1st of sunflowers, and is amongst the top 10 producers of sugar beet, barley, soya, and rapeseed. On the day the invasion began, financial markets around the world fell sharply, and the prices of oil, natural gas, metals, and food commodities surged. Following the latest developments, Brent oil prices breached USD 100 per barrel for the first time since 2014, while Europe's TTF gas prices surged to a record EUR 192 on the 4th of March. While high commodity prices were one of the risks already identified as potentially disruptive to the recovery, the escalation of the conflict increases the likelihood that commodity prices will remain higher for much longer. In turn, it intensifies the threat of long-lasting high inflation, thereby increasing the risks of stagflation and social unrest in both advanced and emerging countries. The crisis is strongly impacting an already strained automotive sector due to various shortages in high commodity and raw material prices, such as metals, semiconductors, cobalt, lithium, and magnesium. Airlines and maritime freight companies will also suffer from higher fuel prices, airlines being the most at risk. First, fuel is estimated to account for about a third of the total costs. Second, European countries, the US, and Canada have forbidden access to their territories to Russian airlines, and in turn, Russia has banned European and Canadian aircraft from its airspace. This means higher costs since airlines will have to take longer routes. Eventually, airlines have little room for rising costs as they continue to face lower revenues due to the impact of the pandemic. Rail freight will also be impacted. European companies are forbidden to do business with Russian railways, which will likely disrupt freight activity between Asia and Europe transiting through Russia. It is also expected that feedstock for petrochemicals to be more expensive and the soaring prices of natural gas to impact the fertilizer markets, hence the whole agri-food industry. Ukraine is among the world's top agricultural producers and exporters, and is often described as the breadbasket of Europe. The Russian Navy imposed a blockade on Ukraine's ports and threatened an amphibious assault against the port of Odessa. This prevented the exports of Ukraine's 2021 grain harvest by sea, triggering a major international food crisis. The UN Food and Agricultural Organization warned in March that global food prices could rise by up to 20% as a result of the war. Ukraine and partner countries made efforts to increase land exports, but this could not compensate for the lost sea shipping capacity. On the 22nd of July, the United Nations and Turkey brokered an agreement between Russia and Ukraine to allow the safe export of Ukrainian grain by sea, known as the Black Sea Grain Initiative. What is the humanitarian impact of the war? Is it safe to say that the situation does not look too good for the refugees of the war? The war caused the largest refugee and humanitarian crisis within Europe since the Yugoslav wars in the 1990s. The UN described it as the fastest growing crisis since World War II. As Russia built up military forces along the Ukrainian border, many neighboring governments and aid organizations prepared for a mass displacement event in the weeks before the invasion. In December 2021, the Ukrainian defense minister estimated that an invasion could force 3 to 5 million people to flee their homes. Most refugees were women, children, the elderly, or people with disabilities. Most male Ukrainian nationals aged 18 to 60 were denied exit from the Ukraine as part of a mandatory conscription unless they were responsible for the financial support of 3 or more children, were single fathers, or were the parent guardian of children with disabilities. Many Ukrainian men, including teenagers in any case, opted to remain in Ukraine to join the resistance. Regarding destinations, according to the UN High Commission for Refugees, as of 13th of May, there were 3,315,711 refugees in Poland, 901,696 in Romania, 594,664 in Hungary, 461,742 in Moldova, 415,402 in Slovakia, and 27,308 in Belarus, while Russia reported it had received over 800,104 refugees. As of the 23rd of March, over 300,000 refugees had arrived in the Czech Republic. Turkey has been another significant destination, registering more than 58,000 Ukrainian refugees as of the 22nd of March, and more than 58,000 as of the 25th of April. The EU invoked the Temporary Protection Directive for the first time in its history, granting Ukrainian refugees the right to live and work in the EU for up to 3 years. We all know that a war in one territory affects other countries all over the world. Let's talk about their role in supporting Ukraine. What aid have other countries provided so far? Western countries and others imposed limited sanctions on Russia when it recognized Donbas as an independent nation. When the attack began, many other countries applied sanctions intended to cripple the Russian economy. The sanctions targeted individuals, banks, businesses, monetary exchanges, bank transfers, exports, and imports. The sanctions cut major Russian banks from SWIFT, the global messaging network for international payments, but left some limited access to ensure the continued ability to pay for gas shipments. Sanctions also included asset freezes on the Russian central bank, which holds $630 billion in foreign exchange reserves, to prevent it from offsetting the impact of sanctions, and froze the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. By the 1st of March, total Russian assets frozen by sanctions amounted to $1 trillion. Kristalina Georgieva, managing director of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, warned that the conflict posed a substantial economic risk both regionally and internationally. The IMF could help other countries affected, she said, in addition to the $2.2 billion loan package for Ukraine. David Malpass, president of the World Bank Group, warned of far-reaching economic and social effects and reported that the bank was preparing options for significant economic and fiscal support to Ukraine and that region. The Russian ruble fell to record lows and Russians rushed to exchange currency. On the 26th of February, S&P Global Ratings downgraded the Russian government credit rating to junk, causing funds that require investment-grade bonds to dump Russian debt, making further borrowing very difficult for Russia. On the 24th of March, Joe Biden's administration issued an executive order which barred the sale of Russian gold reserves in the international market. Gold has been one of Russia's major avenues to protect its economy from the impact of the sanctions imposed since the 2014 annexation of Crimea. On the 17th of June, President Putin spoke to investors at St. Petersburg International Economic Forum about economic sanctions, saying that the economic blitzkrieg against Russia had no chance of succeeding from the very beginning. He further claimed that the sanctions would hurt the countries imposing them more than they would hurt Russia, calling the restrictions mad and thoughtless. He said to the investors, "Invest here. It's safer in your own house." Those who didn't want to listen to this have lost millions abroad. In response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Estonia has removed a remaining Soviet-era monument from a square in Narva. After its removal, Estonia was subject to the most extensive cyber attack since the 2007 cyber attacks on Estonia. Bonus fact. Thank you for staying with us this far. Here's a bonus fact as a token of our appreciation. As of late May, Russian forces had destroyed or damaged 250 museums and institutions in Ukraine. 2,000 art objects are estimated to have been looted and relocated to Russia. Question: do you think that the European economy will be able to recover from this crisis? Or will it only get worse as time goes on? Comment down below and let us know your thoughts. If you enjoyed the content, uplift the channel by hitting like, subscribe, and ring the YouTube bell to meet us again in the next video. Until next time.